The year was 2147, and humanity had spread its wings far beyond Earth. The galaxy was alive with activity, spaceships zipping between planets, alien traders exchanging goods in floating markets, and families traveling across star systems for vacations or work. At the heart of it all stood the Orion spaceport, one of the busiest hubs in the solar system. It was a massive structure that stretched high into the sky, its walls lined with glowing neon signs advertising everything from zero-gravity spas to asteroid mining tours. Karen adjusted her bag on her shoulder as she shuffled through the crowded terminal. Her face was pinched with frustration. She hated waiting in lines, especially when they moved so slowly. Around her, people from different worlds bustled about, humans wearing sleek metallic jackets, aliens with shimmering scales, and robots carrying luggage twice their size. But Karen barely noticed them. All she cared about was getting to Mars for her business trip. She sighed loudly, tapping her foot impatiently. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. "I paid extra for priority boarding. And this is what I get." A line full of amateurs. A few feet ahead, a family caught her eye. They looked completely out of place in the chaos. Dressed in matching outfits made of shiny, futuristic fabric, they radiated confidence and wealth. The father, a tall man with broad shoulders and dark skin, wore a coat embedded with tiny lights that blinked softly. His wife stood beside him, her hair styled in intricate braids adorned with golden threads. Their teenage daughter, who couldn't have been older than 16, leaned casually against a pillar, scrolling through a holographic tablet that hovered in front of her. Karen rolled her eyes. Of course, she thought bitterly. Privileged types always find a way to stand out. As if sensing her disapproval, the man turned slightly, bumping into Karen while adjusting his backpack. He froze immediately, his expression apologetic. "Oh, excuse me," he said, his voice calm and polite. "I didn't mean to." But Karen wasn't listening. Her patience, already thin, snapped like a twig. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, glaring at him. "Some people don't care about personal space, do they?" The man blinked, taken aback by her tone. Before he could respond, his wife stepped forward. She smiled warmly, her eyes kind but firm. "We're really sorry," she said, her voice smooth and soothing. "It was an accident." Karen scoffed. "An accident? Right. Just because you can afford fancy clothes doesn't mean you own the place." She gestured dramatically at their outfits. "Look at yourselves. You probably think you're better than everyone else here." The woman tilted her head slightly, studying Karen with curiosity rather than anger. "We don't think we're better," she replied gently. "We're just trying to enjoy our day like anyone else." "Yeah, right," Karen muttered, crossing her arms. "You act like you own the galaxy." "Well, newsflash, you don't impress me." Behind her, other travelers began to notice the commotion. Some exchanged awkward glances, while others whispered among themselves. A young boy tugged on his mother's sleeve, pointing at Karen. "Why is she yelling?" he asked innocently. Karen ignored them all. She was too busy stewing in her indignation. To her, this family symbolized everything wrong with society. Their expensive gadgets, their perfect appearance, their air of superiority. And now, they were ruining her morning. What Karen didn't realize was that the family was silently amused. As they exchanged quick glances, a subtle smile played on their lips. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly entertained by her outburst. His wife gave him a knowing look, as if to say, "Let her keep talking." Even their daughter smirked, typing something onto her holographic screen before letting it vanish. Finally, after another minute of ranting, Karen ran out of steam. Huffing, she grabbed her bag and stormed a few steps ahead in the line, putting distance between herself and the family. She refused to look back, convinced she'd won the argument. But the family wasn't done yet. As they resumed their conversation, the man leaned closer to his wife and whispered, "Should we teach her a lesson?" His wife chuckled softly. "Patience, Marcus," she said, Let's see how long she lasts before realizing who she's dealing with. And with that, they continued forward, leaving Karen simmering in her own frustration. Little did she know, this encounter was only the beginning of a much bigger story, one that would challenge everything she believed about privilege, power, and humility. The line at the Orion spaceport finally began to move, inching forward like a sluggish river. Karen let out a groan of relief as she shuffled closer to the boarding gate. She glanced around nervously, making sure no one from the family she'd clashed with earlier was nearby. Her cheeks still burned with embarrassment, though she tried to convince herself it wasn't her fault. They started it, she muttered under her breath, gripping her bag tightly. Ahead of her, the same family, Marcus, Amara, and their teenage daughter Zora, was standing casually near the entrance to a separate VIP lounge. A glowing sign above the doorway read, "Elite passengers only." Karen felt her stomach twist as she watched them being greeted warmly by an attendant dressed in a crisp uniform. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely, handing over a small card embedded with a holographic emblem. "We're here for priority lounge access." The attendant scanned the card and nodded immediately. "Welcome, Mr. Voss. Everything is ready for you and your family inside." Karen's jaw dropped as she stared at them. How could they possibly qualify for something so exclusive? They didn't look like royalty or celebrities, at least not to her. Just another rich family flaunting their wealth. She clenched her fists, feeling a fresh wave of anger bubbling up inside her. As the Voss family disappeared into the lounge, Karen turned to the person next to her, a middle-aged man holding a travel case covered in stickers from various planets. "What's so special about that lounge anyway?" she asked sharply, unable to hide her bitterness. The man shrugged. "It's reserved for top-tier travelers. You know, people who own private ships, run big companies, or fund space exploration projects. Not exactly your average Joe." Karen scowled. "So what makes them so important? Look at them. They're just showing off." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her rant. "If I were you, I wouldn't judge too quickly. That's Marcus Voss, the guy who owns half the asteroid mines in this sector. His wife's a genius scientist who helped invent faster-than-light engines. And their kid. She's already training to be a starship captain. Pretty impressive if you ask me." Karen blinked, stunned. None of that made sense to her. Why should someone's accomplishments matter when they acted so entitled? "Yeah, well, money doesn't make you better than anyone else," she snapped, turning away. By the time Karen reached the front of the line, her mood had soured even further. When it was her turn to board, she handed her ticket to the attendant with a forced smile. "Economy class, right?" she asked curtly. The attendant confirmed her seat assignment and pointed toward the shuttle dock nearby. Karen trudged off, dragging her bag behind her. The shuttle was nothing fancy, small, cramped, and filled with rows of uncomfortable-looking seats. She found hers near the back and collapsed into it, letting out a heavy sigh. Around her, other passengers chatted excitedly about their upcoming journeys. Some talked about visiting relatives on Mars, while others discussed plans to explore Jupiter's moons. But Karen tuned them all out. All she could think about was how unfair life was. Why did those people get to relax in a luxurious lounge while she was stuck in this tin can? Meanwhile, inside the elite lounge, the Voss family settled into plush chairs surrounded by panoramic windows offering breathtaking views of the galaxy beyond. Holographic screens displayed live updates on incoming and outgoing flights, and a robotic server glided silently between tables, offering drinks and snacks. Zara leaned back in her chair, scrolling through her tablet. "Mom, Dad, did you see that lady's face when we walked in here? Priceless." Amara chuckled, sipping a steaming cup of coffee infused with exotic spices. "She has no idea who we are. Let her keep guessing." Marcus shook his head, smiling faintly. "People like her always assume the worst. It's sad. Really." Amara placed a hand on his arm. "Don't worry about her. We've dealt with worse. Besides, Karma has a funny way of working things out. Just then, an announcement echoed through the lounge. Attention, elite passengers. Please proceed to Gate 12A for boarding. Your private vessel is ready. The family stood up, gathering their belongings. As they exited the lounge, Marcus paused briefly to glance back at the crowded terminal where Karen sat fuming. He wondered what lessons she might learn today, if she was willing to listen. Back on the shuttle, Karen squirmed uncomfortably in her seat. The lack of legroom irritated her, and the outdated entertainment screen flickered annoyingly every few minutes. To make matters worse, she couldn't stop thinking about the Voss family. Who did they think they were, waltzing around like gods among mortals? Her frustration boiled over when she noticed a group of teenagers sitting across the aisle whispering excitedly about the family. One of them held up a tablet displaying a news article titled, "Voss Industries Expands Galactic Trade Network." "They're literally everywhere," Karen exclaimed loudly, catching the attention of nearby passengers. "Do you see how much they brag? First, the VIP lounge. Now this. Ugh, it's disgusting." The teenagers exchanged awkward glances but said nothing. Instead, they quietly returned to their conversation, leaving Karen alone with her simmering resentment. Minutes later, the shuttle's engines roared to life, vibrating beneath Karen's feet. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the noise. For a brief moment, she imagined herself aboard a luxurious starship like the one belonging to the Voss family. In her fantasy, she lounged in a zero-gravity chair, sipping champagne as robots catered to her every need. But the image faded quickly, replaced by the harsh reality of her surroundings. Suddenly, the shuttle lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. Screams erupted throughout the cabin as warning lights flashed overhead. An automated voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention, passengers. We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please remain calm and secure your belongings." Karen gripped her armrests tightly, panic rising in her chest. What was happening? Was the shuttle going to crash? She looked around frantically, searching for answers, but the crew members seemed just as confused as the passengers. Then, a new transmission came through, this time accompanied by a video feed. On the shuttle's main screen appeared the smiling faces of Marcus, Amara, and Zara Voss. Behind them loomed their massive private starship, its sleek design gleaming against the backdrop of stars. "Good evening, everyone," Marcus began calmly. "Our ship detected your distress signal and is prepared to assist. We'll tow you safely to the nearest station shortly." Karen froze, her heart pounding. Of all the people in the universe, they were the ones coming to save her. The announcement from the Voss family starship echoed through the shuttle, cutting through the panic like a blade. Passengers who had been clutching their seats in fear now stared at the screen in awe. Marcus Voss stood tall and composed, his confident smile radiating calmness despite the chaos around them. Amara stood beside him, her arms crossed but her posture relaxed, as if she'd handled situations like this countless times before. Behind them, Zara leaned casually against the control panel of their massive starship, her teenage smirk betraying just how unimpressed she was by the whole ordeal. Karen felt her stomach churn. She wanted to disappear. Of all the people in the galaxy, of all the ships that could have responded, it had to be them. The same family she'd insulted not an hour earlier. Her cheeks burned with shame, but she quickly pushed it aside, replacing it with indignation. Of course, she muttered under her breath. They'd probably planned this just to show off. But deep down, Karen knew that wasn't true. There was no way they could have predicted the shuttle's malfunction. Still, she clung to her anger because admitting otherwise would mean confronting her own behavior, and that was something she wasn't ready to do. As the Voss family starship maneuvered into position, passengers pressed their faces against the windows to get a better look. The vessel was unlike anything most of them had ever seen. Sleek and silver, it gleamed under the artificial lights of the spaceport, its surface adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. Holographic displays along its sides showed the logo of Voss Industries. a stylized asteroid encircled by orbiting rings. Even the engines hummed softly, emitting the soothing blue glow that contrasted sharply with the harsh red warning lights flashing inside the shuttle. "Wow," one passenger whispered, pressing their hands to the glass. "That thing must cost more than my entire colony." Another chimed in. "Did you hear? They're letting us use their ship for repairs after we dock. Totally free of charge." Karen rolled her eyes, unable to tolerate the admiration pouring out around her. "Yeah, right," she grumbled. "Free? Nothing's ever free. They're just doing this to make themselves look good." Her neighbor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, turned to her. "You sound upset. Do you know them personally?" Karen hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I don't. But trust me, they're not as perfect as everyone thinks." The woman frowned slightly but didn't press further. Instead, she returned to gazing out the window, marveling at the sight of the starship hovering nearby. Inside the Voss family's vessel, preparations were underway. Marcus stood at the helm, guiding the ship with practiced ease. His fingers danced across holographic controls, adjusting thrusters and stabilizers to ensure a smooth connection with the damaged shuttle. Amara monitored the data flowing in from various sensors, ensuring there were no hidden risks. Meanwhile, Zara lounged in a nearby chair, scrolling through messages on her tablet. "So, what's the plan?" Zara asked lazily, glancing up at her parents. "Are we towing these guys all the way to Mars?" Marcus chuckled. "Not quite. We'll take them to the nearest station first. Then they can decide where to go from there." Amara nodded. "And while we're at it, maybe we can teach someone a little lesson about humility." Zara grinned mischievously. "Oh, you mean that lady who yelled at Dad earlier?" "Yeah, I think she deserves a reality check." Marcus raised an eyebrow at his daughter. "Zara, remember what we talked about. This isn't about revenge. It's about helping people and showing them there's another way to live." Zara shrugged, though her grin didn't fade. "Sure, Dad. Whatever you say." Back on the shuttle, the mood shifted as the Voss family starship began towing them toward safety. The violent shaking subsided, replaced by a steady hum as the larger vessel took control. Passengers exhaled collectively, some even breaking into applause. "Thank goodness," a man exclaimed, wiping sweat from his brow. "If it weren't for them, we'd be floating out here forever." "They're heroes," another added, nodding enthusiastically. "Real-life saviors." Karen gritted her teeth, refusing to join in. She hated the way everyone fawned over the Voss family, acting like they were gods descended from the heavens. To her, they were still just rich snobs flaunting their wealth. But try as she might, she couldn't deny the relief washing over her as the shuttle stabilized. For the first time since boarding, she allowed herself to relax slightly. Once the shuttle docked safely at the nearest station, a sleek orbital hub called Nova Haven, the Voss family made their next move. Marcus addressed the passengers via live feed once again, this time speaking directly to them from the station's main hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice warm and welcoming. "We're glad to see that everyone is safe. As promised, our team will assist with any necessary repairs to your shuttle. In the meantime, feel free to explore Nova Haven. It's a beautiful place, and we'd be happy to offer you complimentary access to our facilities, including refreshments, entertainment, and medical care if needed." A cheer erupted among the passengers, many of whom immediately began gathering their belongings to disembark. Karen remained glued to her seat, however, her mind racing. Complimentary access, free food and entertainment. It sounded too good to be true. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this extravagant gesture was somehow directed at her. When Karen finally stepped off the shuttle, she found herself face to face with none other than Amara Voss. The scientist stood near the docking bay, greeting passengers with a serene smile. When her gaze landed on Karen, her expression softened, but there was a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "You must be exhausted," Amara said gently, stepping closer. "Come with me. Let's find you something to eat. Karen hesitated, unsure how to respond. Part of her wanted to lash out, to accuse Amara of mocking her. But another part, the smaller, quieter part, felt a twinge of guilt. After everything that had happened, the least she could do was accept the offer without making a scene. Fine, Karen muttered, following Amara reluctantly. But I'm not staying long. Amara chuckled softly. Take all the time you need. Space travel can be stressful, especially when things go wrong. Trust me, I've been there. As they walked together through the bustling corridors of Nova Haven, Karen couldn't help but notice the luxury surrounding her. Every wall was lined with glowing panels displaying breathtaking views of distant stars. Robots glided silently between clusters of travelers, offering drinks and snacks. Even the air smelled clean and fresh, infused with a subtle hint of exotic flowers. This is incredible, Karen admitted begrudgingly, her voice barely above a whisper. Amara smiled. It's not about the money, you know. It's about creating spaces where people can feel safe and inspired. That's what drives us, to make the galaxy a better place. For the first time, Karen saw a glimpse of the person behind the polished exterior. Amara wasn't just a wealthy scientist. She was someone who genuinely cared about others. And suddenly, Karen realized how small and petty she'd been. Nova Haven was a marvel of futuristic engineering, a sprawling orbital station that seemed to float effortlessly in the vastness of space. Its transparent domes offered panoramic views of the cosmos, while its interior buzzed with life. Aliens, humans, and robots mingling seamlessly. For most passengers, it felt like stepping into paradise after the chaos of the shuttle malfunction. But for Karen, it was anything but relaxing. She sat alone at a table near the edge of the dining hall, picking at a plate of synthetic noodles that tasted faintly of citrus. Around her, other passengers laughed and chatted animatedly, sharing stories about their narrow escape and marveling at the generosity of the Voss family. Many had already taken tours of the station's facilities, returning with glowing reviews of the zero-gravity lounges, AI chefs, and holographic entertainment suites. But Karen couldn't bring herself to join in. Every smile directed toward the Voss family felt like a personal jab. She hated how everyone fawned over them, treating them like royalty. And yet she couldn't deny the strange warmth growing inside her, a mix of guilt and admiration that she desperately tried to suppress. Amara approached Karen cautiously, holding 2 steaming cups of tea. Her movements were graceful, almost deliberate, as if she sensed Karen's discomfort and wanted to ease it without being intrusive. Mind if I sit? She asked softly, gesturing to the empty chair across from Karen. Karen hesitated, then shrugged. It's your station. Amara chuckled lightly, setting 1 cup down in front of Karen. Actually, it belongs to everyone here, including you. Karen glanced at the tea, unsure whether to accept it. After a moment, she muttered a reluctant thanks and took a sip. The flavor was rich and earthy, unlike anything she'd ever tasted before. For a brief second, she forgot her resentment. So, Amara began, leaning back in her chair. How are you holding up? Karen stiffened, caught off guard by the question. She expected judgment or condescension, not genuine concern. I'm fine, she replied curtly, avoiding eye contact. Just ready to get out of here. Amara nodded, unfazed by Karen's tone. Understandable. Space travel can be stressful, especially when things don't go as planned. But sometimes, unexpected detours lead to new perspectives. Karen frowned, sensing a deeper meaning behind Amara's words. Was this some kind of veiled lecture? Look, I appreciate what you've done for us, she said, her voice tight. But I don't need a pep talk. Amara smiled gently. No pep talk, I promise. Just an observation. You seem unhappy, and I wonder why. Karen opened her mouth to retort but stopped herself. Why was she so unhappy? It wasn't just the shuttle incident or the embarrassment of being rescued by the Voss family. There was something deeper, an emptiness she couldn't quite name. "I'm not unhappy," she said finally, though even she didn't believe it. "I'm just tired. Tired of people thinking they're better than me because they have money or connections." Amara tilted her head slightly, studying Karen with curiosity. "Do you think we believe we're better than you?" Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Isn't that why you invited everyone here? To show off what you can afford?" To her surprise, Amara laughed, a warm, genuine sound that softened the tension between them. "If we wanted to show off, we wouldn't waste our time rescuing stranded shuttles. We'd throw parties on luxury cruisers instead." Karen blinked, unsure how to respond. She'd never considered that perspective before. "We help people because it's the right thing to do," Amara continued. "Not because we want praise or attention. My husband built his company from scratch, working long nights in cramped labs. I spent years studying physics, often doubting myself along the way. And our daughter." She paused, smiling fondly. "Well, let's just say she inherited her parents' determination. None of us got where we are by flaunting wealth or privilege. We earned it through hard work and perseverance." Karen stared at her, feeling a lump rise in her throat. Everything Amara said made sense, yet it clashed with the narrative Karen had constructed in her mind. In her version of events, the Voss family was arrogant and entitled, using their resources to lord over others. But now, faced with their kindness and humility, she realized how wrong she'd been. Later that evening, Marcus addressed the passengers once again, this time in person. He stood at the center of the dining hall, surrounded by glowing holograms displaying images of distant galaxies and advanced technology. His presence commanded attention, but his demeanor remained humble and approachable. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," he began, his voice resonating through the room. "We're grateful to have played a small role in ensuring your safety. Space exploration is a shared journey, one that requires cooperation and compassion. No matter where you come from or what challenges you face, remember that we're all connected by our desire to explore, learn, and grow." The crowd erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. Karen watched silently, her emotions swirling like a storm. She wanted to clap, to cheer along with the others, but something held her back. Pride, perhaps, or fear of admitting she'd misjudged the Voss family so completely. As the applause died down, Marcus added one final note. "Before we part ways, I'd like to extend an invitation. Tomorrow morning, we'll be hosting a private tour of our starship for anyone interested. It's not every day you get to see inside a vessel like ours, and we'd love to share the experience with you." Karen shook her head. "Not really. Just browsing." Karen felt a pang of curiosity despite herself. A private tour of the Voss family starship. It sounded like an opportunity she couldn't pass up, but also one she didn't deserve. That night, Karen lay awake in her temporary quarters, staring at the ceiling as thoughts raced through her mind. She replayed the day's events over and over, each memory bringing fresh waves of shame. She thought about Amara's words, about Marcus's speech, about the way the entire family carried themselves with quiet confidence rather than arrogance. They weren't the villains she'd imagined them to be. They were heroes, plain and simple. And yet, Karen struggled to reconcile this realization with her own behavior. How could she face them after everything she'd said? Would they even want her on the tour tomorrow? Her internal debate lasted hours, leaving her exhausted but no closer to a decision. Finally, as dawn approached, she made up her mind. She would attend the tour, not because she wanted to impress the Voss family, but because she owed it to herself to confront her mistakes head-on. The next morning, Karen arrived at the designated docking bay early, her heart pounding with anticipation. The Voss family starship loomed before her, its sleek design more impressive up close. Holographic displays shimmered across its surface, showcasing technical specifications and mission logs. A robotic attendant greeted her warmly, guiding her aboard alongside a small group of other passengers. Inside, the ship was a masterpiece of innovation and luxury. Walls lined with interactive panels displayed real-time data about the galaxy, while plush seating areas offered stunning views of the stars. Karen wandered through the corridors in awe, her earlier resentment melting away with each step. At the heart of the ship lay the command center, where Marcus, Amara, and Zara awaited the group. They greeted everyone warmly, answering questions and sharing stories about their adventures in space. When Karen finally worked up the courage to approach them, her voice trembled with emotion. I wanted to say thank you," she stammered, her cheeks flushing red, "for everything. I know I didn't deserve it, but I'm sorry for how I acted." Marcus smiled kindly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Apology accepted. We all make mistakes. It's how we grow that matters." Amara nodded in agreement. "And who knows, maybe someday you'll inspire someone else to change their perspective." Karen felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. For the first time in years, she felt hopeful, not just about her journey home, but about the person she could become. The woman nodded knowingly. Sometimes the best stories find us when we least expect them. Karen wandered through the aisles, running her fingers along the spines of books until one title stopped her cold: The Galaxy Within Us. Intrigued, she pulled it from the shelf and flipped it open. The dedication page read, "To those who dare to look beyond themselves." She bought the book without hesitation, clutching it tightly as she left the store. Back in her quarters, she curled up in a chair and began reading. The story followed a character much like herself, someone who started out cynical and self-centered, but gradually learned to embrace empathy and humility. By the time she reached the final chapter, tears streamed down her face. It wasn't just fiction. It was a mirror reflecting her own journey. A week passed, and Karen prepared to return to Earth. Her trip had gone smoothly, but her mind kept drifting back to the Voss family. She wondered if they were still traveling through the stars, helping others in need. Would she ever see them again? Probably not. But she hoped that somehow, somewhere, they knew how much their actions had meant to her. On the day of her departure, Karen arrived early at the spaceport. This time, she didn't complain about the lines or grumble about delays. Instead, she struck up conversations with fellow travelers, sharing stories and laughter. When a young boy accidentally bumped into her while chasing after a toy drone, she laughed it off, ruffling his hair playfully. "You're good," the boy's mother said, smiling apologetically. "No harm done," Karen replied, surprising herself with how genuine her tone sounded. The journey home was uneventful, which suited Karen just fine. She spent most of it reflecting on everything that had happened since her arrival at Orion Spaceport. From the initial confrontation with Marcus to the revelation aboard the starship, every moment had shaped her in ways she couldn't have predicted. When the shuttle finally landed on Earth, Karen stepped out into the familiar surroundings of her hometown. The sky was gray, the air crisp with autumn chill. Yet, for the first time in years, she felt at peace. She hailed a taxi and gave the driver her address, leaning back in the seat as the cityscape blurred past her window. Weeks turned into months, and Karen continued to grow. She volunteered at local shelters, mentored aspiring entrepreneurs, and even started writing articles about the importance of kindness and community. Her newfound perspective inspired those around her, creating ripples of positivity that extended far beyond her immediate circle. One rainy afternoon, as she sipped coffee at her favorite cafe, a news alert popped up on her tablet. The headline read, "Voss Industries announces new initiative to support space travel accessibility." Beneath it was a photo of Marcus, Amara, and Zara standing proudly in front of their starship. Karen smiled, feeling a surge of pride. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them with courage and compassion. After all, the galaxy wasn't just out there among the stars. It was within each of us, waiting to shine.